everybody. I hope you're all having a blessed day. You're listening to the very first episode of the Accelerator podcast. Today, we'll have Graham Yoko, our CEO at Accelerated Education Enterprises. He will share his heart on the vision, mission, and the values at Accelerated Education Enterprises. He will also take a look back at where we started and where we're going. So, stay tuned.
So, welcome to the very first episode of the AEE podcast. We're excited to have you with us and to be able to be coming to you via this medium. Trust that you're going to enjoy our interactions together, not only today, but in the months that lie ahead. We're looking forward to what will emerge from the podcast. And we've decided to call our podcast the Accelerator. Now, you might be asking, why would we have chosen the name Accelerator for our podcast? It's very simple. Over the years, the past 37 years, we've had a way of communicating with folk out there about what we're doing and how it's going, and getting testimonies back from so many schools and students and even educators and parents. And so we've decided to use the same format, the Accelerator, which initially was a printed publication. And what we would do is print it in on a quarterly basis and then send it out to schools all over the country and indeed over the continent. But what we've realized is that with the pandemic and the challenges that it has brought, we need to move forward with our technology and also the digital presentation of our Accelerator. And so what we've done is moved it onto the platform of a podcast and also a blog. And so we're trusting that you're going to enjoy interacting with us. We're looking forward to hosting several guests on topical issues that are affecting education today. And I know that as you interact, and we would really appreciate your feedback as well as we go forward. So a little bit of history as we start out. I think it's so important for us to look back and say, where has God brought us from, and where are we going to, and what are the focus points that we need to keep in mind as we go forward. AEE, you might ask yourself, what is AEE, Accelerated Education Enterprises? And we are simply an innovative developer of value-based education solutions, meeting the needs of the ever-changing education landscape that we find ourselves in today. So what do we do as a company? What do we do as an organization? We navigate the path towards modern education. And there's a desperate need for education systems in our nation to change. And around the world, the same need exists. So AE provides innovative curriculum materials and e-learning solutions to unlock academic success, not only at schools, but also at home, as an educating your children from home, a home educator. The AE product range will enable you to do that very, very well. And then Accelerated Education Enterprises is also the distributor of the ACE, which is Accelerated Christian Education Program throughout Africa and Scandinavia. And AE designs and distributes educational products that are in printed and online formats to meet the educational needs of students throughout Africa. I think you'll agree that not everybody has access to the internet and to online learning. And so we're saying nobody should be left behind. No child should be disadvantaged if they don't have internet connection. We're looking at doing both printed and online education so that the user can decide what's going to be best for them. Now, I believe for us as an organization and for people involved in education, we need to have a vision. A vision, the Bible says that where there is no vision, the people perish. And so we have a very simple vision here at AEE, and that is an educated Africa. We want to see an educated Africa where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential. We believe that every single person has full potential that God has given them, and yet life seems to drain that away. And so education is the key to every student being able to reach that full potential and their destiny that God has ordained for them. And then secondly, our mission. How are we going to get this done over the next period of time? Well, we want to empower and impact Africa by delivering access to world-class education solutions that are innovative and relevant to the continent. There's so many solutions that are out there, but many of them aren't relevant to where we are at. And so we're wanting to make sure that whatever we're putting out there is going to meet the needs of the African student, and we'll be able to assist them in achieving that full potential. Well, I'd like to take you back a few years and just give you a little bit of history about where Accelerated Christian Education and AEE began. It was back in 1983 when Dr. Donald Howard and his family came over to South Africa and began to travel around the country and share the vision of Christian education. I remember Dr. Howard used to say so many times that we need to go back to the biblical mandate of education. And biblical educational reform was his mantra. Well, he began to share with pastors and with teachers and with church leaders that there was a way that you could run a school in your church, because church buildings are mainly standing vacant from Monday to Friday. And so the ACE program allowed churches to convert that vacant room into a school during the week. Well, it began to take root, and many pastors and administrators and church leaders took up the challenge, and schools began to be established all over South Africa and into Africa as well. Ashton and Grace Sparrow were the leaders of the Accelerated Christian Education Ministry in those days, and due to health challenges that Ashton experienced, they had to step down, and my dad, Pastor Trevor Yoko, was approached by Dr. Donald Howard and asked if he would take up the leadership of ACE at that time in South Africa and Africa. Over the past 35 years, we've seen God do an amazing work, and there's been the establishment of a united association of like-minded schools that are dedicated to seeing a godly generation being raised up. And AE has been the organization or the vehicle that has been used to distribute these materials throughout the continent of Africa and even as far as Scandinavia. We've been able to impact schools in Denmark, in Norway, in Sweden, and also in some of the Indian Ocean islands, which has been very exciting for us to get involved in. AE and the associated schools have survived some immense political challenges as well. Not many people are aware of this, but when we started out in the early 1980s, you might remember that South Africa was still ruled by the apartheid regime of the day. And when schools started to enroll, church schools now started to enroll students of multiracial backgrounds, it suddenly became a major problem because this was against the law at that particular time. And so what transpired, which was quite scary at that particular season, was one of the schools was actually bombed because of the multiracial integration that was taking place. And another school had the bomb defused just hours before the students were due to arrive at school. And so despite the unsettling nature of this attack and onslaught at that particular time, the schools just continued to carry on and to move forward with the goal that God had given them. Many schools during that time had to order their materials directly from the United States. And I recall schools having to place that order based on the number of students that they had at that particular time. And then what happened was, as the shipment was coming over to the school, more students would join. And so there was a need for additional materials, and it became very problematic for schools to operate efficiently. And so it was that in 1988, the first distribution center for the Accelerated Christian Education materials was established in Pietermaritzburg. Shortly thereafter, basically a year later, we outgrew the facilities in Pietermaritzburg and moved to a warehouse in Durban, which made it much more practical because of the access to the port facilities that were close by. In 1991, the warehouse once again outgrew the facilities that they were occupying at that particular time, and it was in early 1992 that we found a permanent home at 13 Glenanel Street in Durban North. It's where we are operating from today, and we can just give thanks to God for the journey that we've been able to travel over this particular time. AEE has continued to grow and now supplies schools in over 22 African nations and also in some of the Indian Ocean islands, such as Madagascar and Mauritius. So one thing we've learned as we've navigated, and I want us just to ponder this a little bit, is that we've realized in the midst of the global lockdown that there's more than one way to accomplish a task. I'm sure that if you're out there, you've had to find different ways of doing things that we used to do in a certain way prior to COVID. And so we've had to become very innovative in the midst of all of this. And so as we move forward with primary and secondary education and even higher education, we need to realize that it's never going to be the same again. There seems to be this perception that if we just wait long enough, we can go back to the way it was. But what we have realized is that the ability to respond and to be nimble in our response to the needs of the students and the education institutions is going to be key as we go forward. So we're excited as Accelerated Education Enterprises to be on the forefront of adapting to the new normal that's out there. And the reality is that the new normal, even of a month ago, is not the normal that we're experiencing today. And so there's a need to constantly be adjusting and adapting to where we're going together. I'm reminded of a American author, designer, inventor, and a futurist. His name was Buckminster Fuller. And in his book, Critical Path, which he published in 1982, he describes the knowledge doubling curve. This is very interesting for us because what he did was he said, how often does knowledge double in society? He went right back to the beginning of time in 1 AD, and he determined that knowledge doubled once every century. So once every 100 years, there was a doubling of knowledge. It's now estimated that knowledge doubles every 18 months, and the pace of growth is increasing every single day. In March 2019, David Schilling, the editor of Industry Tap, picked up the discussion and he reported, and listen to this is so amazing. The knowledge available to humankind in 1985 was 65 times what was available in 1 AD. So they had doubled 65 times. So now we need to look at where is that rate of doubling of knowledge today. This is what is known as an exponential trajectory. In other words, it's like a curve. And as it goes this way, the time span gets a lot shorter and the change gets a lot quicker. In 2001, IBM estimated that knowledge was doubling every 1 to 2 years. Every 1 to 2 years. That's every 12 months. IBM estimates today that, listen to this, knowledge is doubling every 11 to 12 hours. Every 11 to 12 hours, knowledge is doubling. Because of the increasing use of the Internet of Things and big data, the continued advancement of science, we're assured that we will be continuing on this path. And if it's currently at 11 to 12 hours, in another 6 months, it could be 11 to 12 minutes, where that a doubling of knowledge is happening as we watch. So for schools, we've got to ask ourselves, what does this mean? Because if we just carry on doing education the way that we were doing it, we're going to get left behind. And I've listened with interest as I've heard government departments share their thoughts of how they're going to address this moving forward. The reality is, if you don't have a nimble and responsive approach to education, you are going to get left behind. You're going to be outdated before you've even begun. So it means that schools need to be selective in what they teach. Teaching timeless knowledge and focusing on how to find knowledge rather than simply trying to cram it in, which is what we're experiencing right now, is that everybody crams for this final exam. But at the end of that exam, the knowledge is missing. So we don't want to go down that road of just simply trying to cram facts in, because whatever facts you cram in today, just think about it, in 12 hours, they're going to be outdated. So there's a need for us to move forward very practically. For society, it means adjusting how we think schools should be designed and what outcomes they should seek. We've got to be sure that the schools that our children go to are schools that are equipping them for life, not just simply going through the motions. Buckminster Fuller also said this. He said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. What we've seen happen is that schools have tried to retool themselves, or education departments around the continent have tried to retool themselves to fit in with the changes that have taken place. But there's a time now for us to take the tools out and bring in a brand new machine, bringing something that's going to reach our young people in the next generations that lie ahead. And what's actually happening is that there is going to be an obsolescence of current systems of education. If you think about the reality, students are going online, they're able to get knowledge, they're able to get skills, and to acquire those skills by doing short courses. Even the need for higher education is being questioned at the moment, because there is so much change that's happening that if you had to do a 4-year degree, by the time you got to the middle of that degree, the information you learned at the beginning of it would be obsolete. So how are we going to adapt, and how are we going to fit all of this in? I think it's very exciting. And I believe that where we're at as Accelerated Education Enterprises is at a space where we're able to move with the changes that are happening in education and to provide solutions that will be able to meet the needs of the modern student. As we close off on this particular podcast today, I want to just highlight our values and the values that we embrace here at Accelerated Education Enterprises. Firstly, we have a value of godliness. And that doesn't mean that we're perfect. It doesn't mean that we never sin or that we do everything right, but it means that we respond to things that happen in our lives, that things that happen in our organization, and things that happen around the world in a godly manner. And we do our very best to do what we believe Jesus would do in these situations. We get it right sometimes we're challenged, but we keep on going forward and improving every single day. Then secondly, we have a value of excellence. And excellence, we believe, doesn't mean that you have to have the best of everything. It simply means that you do the best with everything that you have. And we take everything that God has placed in our hands and use it to the maximum for His glory and His honor, and for achieving the vision that we have of seeing our nation and our continent educated. Thirdly, our third value is integrity. Integrity simply means that we do what we say and we say what we do. And that we put out there very, very boldly is that we want to be known as an organization that is doing what they say. And so if we've promised something, if we've agreed to something, we want to see that through and make sure that it happens. Our final value today is innovation. And this is really where we find ourselves taking godliness, excellence, integrity, and combining it into the value of innovation as well, to be able to provide the latest up-to-date education solutions that are necessary for our students around the continent. You know, our culture is more than just some words on a wall. Our culture is more than just a poster or something that we share or speak about. Our culture is something that we live out on a daily basis. And the culture that defines us here at AEE, godliness, excellence, integrity, and innovation, is embraced by every single one of our team members. And so we are excited to be able to be part of what's happening in the education arena moving forward. So I want to encourage you as you join us for future episodes of the AEE Accelerator podcast, that you get ready to be inspired by our various speakers. We're going to be looking at having guests come in that will be speaking to specific issues that are relevant to your school, and that the information that you get from the podcast and the blog will equip you to be able to go forward and to accomplish the task that God has for you in your Christian school and your Christian education ministry. We look forward to being with you, and join us next time for a great interaction with our next guest.
Thank you so much, Graham, as you share the heart and the history of Accelerated Education Enterprises. The Accelerator podcast is available at Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. Don't forget to join us at www.aeegroup.co.za.